Hey, how's everybody doing out there? I just came back from eating myself a bowl of red beans and rice, thankfully. So, it's good that I got something in my stomach. But anyways, here's what I want to talk about. Now, as all of you out there are probably familiar with and know, one of my viewers, people who watch my channel, of course, brought to my attention a case in New Mexico where a cop was shown with a young woman on the hood of his car. And, I was looking at some of the comments that were left on YouTube, and, on YouTube, of course, and a lot of them were left by, stupid little 13, 15-year-olds who were saying, yeah, it's better that he does that than murder somebody, which, to me, if that is a case of the woman was one of his, arrestees, one of the people in his custody, you cannot, that's not a fair situation where you can give your consent because of the enormous power that the cop has over you. So they were going on talking about, yeah, he's using his magic stick, boo, boo, boo. Now, I decided to do a little bit more research on the internet to try to find out whether she was one of his cases or not, because that's something that really strikes at the heart of me, especially being, as pro-sex workers' rights as I am. Being a dominatrix, that's something I don't fucking tolerate. Is somebody, especially a cop, misusing and abusing their power and taking advantage of a woman or, a guy, which is starting to happen more and more. And does happen, but not as much as it happens to women, of course, because of our patriarchal, puritanical, anti-woman society, Talibanish-like morals that we have towards women. The Talibanish attitudes that we have towards women in our society. So anyways, I went on the Smoking Guns website to try to find out the real veracity of the situation. So when I went to the Smoking Guns website, I was really, really, really disturbed by the comments that I saw. Such as from Rob Belcher, Zane Meadows, and by this sucker right here, Richard J. Lone, where they were basically encouraging that behavior and say, yeah, go ahead on, boy, go ahead, hopefully you got it in, you got your nightstick in her, woo, woo, woo. Now, it's not only the fact that these comments were obviously coming from adults, but it's also the fact that a lot of these commenters here are cops, such as this guy right here, this sick fuck, Richard J. Lone, and he was formerly with the Baltimore Police Department, if you look up his profile. But when I read comments like that, I can't help but wonder, how many times a lot of those people, went out there on the streets and raped sex workers with those attitudes. You have to have a total lack of respect for women. A total, just a total lack of respect. Like, you have to be a darn misogynist in order to think that way and to do those things. Because think about it, at the end of the day, that could have been your mother. That could have been your sister. That could have been your daughter on the hood of a car. That could have been you, because more gay men are starting to come out. They're starting to speak out, and of course they're on the police departments across the nation. So that could be some gay dude who pulls you over, some big old strapping gay cop who pulls you over and sees you and think you some nice looking attractive bear, or you're some nice looking attractive twink, and decide, hey, I'm gonna take advantage of you and tell you, okay, I can either take away your freedom, or in other words, take away your life, or you go straight to jail. And I don't the fact is that at the end of the day, when somebody can take your freedom away from you, which is worse than taking your life, because at least in that you're free. When somebody has the power to take away your freedom from you, you don't have a choice. You don't have consent. That's not consent. Anytime you're in any situation where somebody holds an enormous amount of power over you, you cannot consent. That's why they say that in prison, for instance, they have rules explicitly stating that there's to be no sexual contact, no sexual harassment whatsoever between guards and prisoners. Now, of course, we all know that these things go on. As I saw in this video here, turned out sexual assault behind bars, where they had one young man who was reporting how he was raped and I wouldn't even call it blackmail, but raped by one of I think not the warden, but he was one of the lieutenants in the prison that he was in Florida. But in a lot of those cases, the fact is that they have explicit rules against that because, like, let's say, for instance, you refuse his advance. As I saw in the case of one of the sex workers that I interviewed when I hit the stroll on Western Street out here in Figueroa. She told me that when she refused to go with the whole either, you let me rape you, I'm not going to say let me rape you, but either you go with the rape or else you go to jail, bid that a lot of the cops pull on these women, especially the Hispanic cops. They're very notorious, from what I was told, down there for doing that. What happened was that the next preceding night, the child was, and she was a child too, she was 19 years old. She was out on the stroll, trying to work, and all of a sudden the cops caught her up again. And what they did was that they sexually assaulted her under the guise of a pat-down. The same thing that the officer did to me, the female officer did to me when I was arrested in West Hollywood. Not West Hollywood, excuse me, in Hollywood for this, BS so-called gypsy cat thing. She touched me when, about like a second or minute into doing a pat search on me. She touched my vaginal area, and when I stopped, she patted me on the vagina once, and when I yelled, she stopped. And of course I did file a complaint, and they tried to justify it, despite the fact that I pointed out to them if I was to do that to her, wouldn't that be sexual assault? And they concurred, and then they tried to say, well, they have to pat you down for weapons. Well, I've seen situations where, even in cases where people are known to have weapons, they don't get patted in that area. And I wasn't being brought up for having weapons on my person. So that's a mute, irrelevant excuse. That's got nothing to do with what happened. A sexual assault, what she did. Let me touch her on her pussy and let's see how she feels. So anyways, not to deviate from the main topic here, getting back to it. That's why in those situations you cannot consent. You don't have the freedom, you don't have the ability to consent. Because, like, let's say, for instance, you're in prison and a guard comes up to you and they say, hey, I want to have sex with you. Now, they're not physically forcing themselves on you, of course. But what they're doing is that, let's say, for instance, you reject them. Well, they have something that they call in prison called tickets, where they can write something on your ticket saying that, you did woo, whatever, so such and such, and they can keep you in there for longer, and there's nothing that you can do with it. For instance, that was the case with Norma Jean Almodovar, who was a sex worker who was, because she exposed a lot of the cops and, a lot of horrific, stuff that was on the same scale of conspiracy of silence, raping children and so forth with the LA Perverters, Explorers program. She was put in jail for an unusual amount of time, and that's called, constitutionally speaking, cruel and unusual punishment. That's why I don't even believe in our so-called justice system, because there's no justice in this justice system. It's so blind. But anyways, what happened in her case was that, something like that happened to her. And, for me, I would have been like, well, I ain't got nothing to lose, so I would have bit that son of a bitch's dick off and swallowed it so that he wouldn't be able to reattach it, as was the case with Lorena Bobbitt's, that bastard that she was with. But unfortunately, Miss Almodovar, she had a husband on the outside and the whole 9 years and everything. She was raped and forced to do oral on the guy because she really wanted to get out of prison. And this is something that's not uncommon, and it happens to a lot of sex workers, and it happens to a lot of women. So, all these people who are saying things like, oh yeah, go cop, go, that could be you, And I even though the media is saying that, she wasn't one of his cases, that she wasn't arrested by him. The fact is that if, I'm not going to even call it extortion, I'm going to call it rape. That's what it is, rape. If he's raping her, that might have been her car that she drove out there. Like, for instance, if he tells her, oh, I'm going to give you a ticket, in this economy, many people can't afford tickets, and especially if you're a young teenager child and you got some big brawny cops, a male cop, pulling you over, and telling you, hey, here's this ticket, either you take this ticket that's like 120, insurance rates go up, many people can't afford that. So, the woman goes along with him, and the fact is that the search, the pullover could have been unconstitutional. He could have been, what do they call it, profiling her and thinking to himself, oh yeah, young woman, she might have not done anything wrong, so the initial, the reason for the stop might be unconstitutional. So even if she did offer to do something with him to get out of the ticket, still, it's rape, technically speaking, because of the enormous power he has. And with the fact that, he brought her to a desolate area and did that, it's just, it's too triggering for me. It reminds me of a lot of the stories that a lot of sex workers told me when I used to do my cop watch on the Figueroa Stroll. And I might just get back to doing it once I have the, have everything in gear. But like I say, even if she did consent to it, or if it was a case of where she was in trouble and she could have gotten a misdemeanor and taken to jail, that's rape, because who wants to abdicate their freedom, have their freedom lost, I mean, I saw that the fact that was probably her car or his car or whatever, and that might have been a case of where, she was arrested for something and he made her agree to come back the next day to an undisclosed location and, do something with him. All of those things are rape because he has a lot of power over her. That's more than exploitation. He has a lot of power. He can take away her freedom from her or give her that ticket, and because he knows he can have, so much power over her. I mean, think about it. When you go into traffic court, the cop's word is gold. That's why it's so important to have the Mino camcorder. That's why it's so important for us to retain our Second Amendment rights. To fight these son of a bitches, to fight these pigs when they do stuff like this. So she probably figured, if I just go along with it, and as I've heard from so many sex workers, it's not like with a regular escort where, you start the timer and, you look at the time and you say, okay, an hour's up. He has total control of the situation. He can determine how long he wants to be there with her. She has no rights. He's the cop. And then he can decide, well, I'm still going to take you to jail anyways, in which I've heard many sex workers tell me, that even after they were raped, the cops still took them to jail. And that could have been the case with her. She might